And welcome back. I've got Ruben Mattenson on the line. Ruben, how are you?
I'm great, Michael. Great to be here.
Great to have you. Been looking forward to this one for a bit, so I'm glad that you're finally on the show. So why don't you share a little bit about you, and then we'll jump into the conversation.
I've had the very unconventional career pathway of physical therapist to high school science teacher and examiner into global tax consultancy in the US. And I guess even more unconventionally, being based in the UK throws it off even more. But no, I have a passion of helping businesses and entrepreneurs who are trying to sell online, whether it's services, products, whatever, just navigate that crazy space of tax.
Yeah, it's an ever-changing landscape for sure, and a lot of entrepreneurs, especially when they leave their regular business, if they're in the US, they're working for somebody, they get a W-2, they pay taxes and all that, and all of a sudden they decide they want to launch their own business, and they go through all of the various things to consider, and some of them set up corporations, some of them set up LLCs, some of them don't do any of that. And the tax ramifications of how you set things up and where you work, what you're doing. There's so many different caveats because we say United States, but each state has its own tax rules and regulations, but depending on where you're operating on and where your customers are, what type of work you're doing. So there's a lot of nuances that a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to this show, may not be familiar with. So I love how the fact that you kind of shared your career path journey, and it definitely sounds like, hey, this sounds interesting. I'm going to do this, which is amazing. I love when people do that because I tell people it's your life. You get to design it however you like. So, to navigate through all of those different things, and now doing the tax side of things. What landed you on the tax component of your career so far?
About 7 years ago, I started my own online store, selling products into the US because I saw the opportunity, the land of opportunity. I was just doing that, selling anything and everything with a profit margin on it, and basically just started getting hit quite quickly with all of the hurdles and the walls of sales tax complexity initially. When you're an online seller trying to sell a course or a service or a physical product, having to navigate what selling into every state across the US means for you um, was incredibly complex. And I spoke to a lot of law firms and accountancy firms and ended up hitting my head against a lot of brick walls of being none the wiser, spending a lot of money. So I just kind of figured that there's a real niche here to specialize in sales tax first and foremost, and help e-commerce sellers like myself who need that kind of complex solution to being able to sell across the whole state. So that's kind of how it happened, just seeing that need and trying to fulfill it.
So, and I love that as well because you experienced it and you're like, okay, if I'm experiencing this, everybody's experiencing it. Okay, how do we navigate around this? So a challenge became an opportunity for you. And what happened was obviously the work that you're doing now and helping entrepreneurs navigate that landscape. And my original career is in accounting. So I worked for an
Oh,
accounting
wow.
firm, and I remember tax season. I remember that those long, 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 long hours. And that's just, businesses and individual taxes on top of, businesses that ran, businesses and whatnot. And, there wasn't, I'm dating myself a little bit here, but there wasn't online businesses back then. There really wasn't
Mm,
online when I first started. I mean, then you started seeing AOL pop up and other industries. The dot-com era didn't come in till after I had left that industry. But it's one of those things where you're like, hey, you can make a lot of money in online business, which obviously, a ton of people have. But the key thing is you want to keep some of that money, don't you? Yeah. And so that's why you have to navigate that. So as you were exploring, this and learning about the nuances and deciding, okay, you know what, I got to provide this service to people to help them out. What were some of the, I don't want to point fingers, but are there some states that are a little bit more challenging to deal with than others?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you've got a plethora and a real of states to choose from, but I mean, you've got a real spectrum I guess how aggressive the states want to be with you. Um, I say I don't want to chuck any state under the bus, but I do actually. I'm going to chuck California under the bus. California, I think, are known for being the most aggressive for sure, and they really chase you on the sales tax front, but they chase you on their franchise tax front as well, their income state, income tax as well. So they've really kind of reared their head of late for Amazon sellers actually. What changed quite quickly, so if there's any Amazon sellers out there, which I'm sure there are, or people who are looking into it, just because you store your products in an FBA warehouse, which fulfills your orders to people in California. Just doing that now makes you liable for franchise tax. Where for a while they didn't really pursue that, but now they really pursue that quite aggressively, come after people. So there's a lot of our clients who have had come to us with these, letters they've had and backlog. So they're pretty rough. And obviously you've got your friendly states which don't even have sales tax, which is a very different world. So yeah, I won't bore the audience any further, but I think that's a good example of one to watch out for.
Yeah, California definitely is a um, I'll say tax friendly state. And I mean that tax friendly for the state and
Yeah,
not for
that's true. Yeah.
businesses. We've
Yeah.
seen, tons of industries, some that have been there for decades up and leave because the taxation is just out of hand. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of reasons, and I tend to try to stay away from politics, but it boils down to this, and this goes back to going to college. I remember I had an economics class, and the professor kind of explained the differences between the two main political parties in the U.S. And obviously, we talked about taxation and things like that. And there are some governments that want to provide all kinds of different social services, everything. They want to be the one-stop shop for everything. Well, that costs money, of course. So they need to raise taxes in order to provide those services. Where other governments tend to lean more towards let business and innovation and businesses do provide these types of services. Let's scale back what we do, which then in turn tends to lower taxes. Bottom line, we're going to pay for it one way or the other. You're either going to pay for it in your
Mhm.
taxes or you're going to pay for it for services. But that's a very generic baseline on it. But we've seen it. The stats are there. The documentation is there that the taxation in states like California are you know astronomically different than others. And you look and you go, okay, what are we seeing in return from a taxpayer standpoint? Are there additional services? Are there things that need to be addressed or are being taken care of? Or are there still the same challenges you see in states that don't have higher taxes? So, again, that's a discussion, a political argument, but from an entrepreneur standpoint, it's very important for you to recognize that and go, okay, if that's going to be can do if you're based in California, okay, that's one thing. But if you're running an online type of business and you're not necessarily based in that particular state from a taxation standpoint and setting up your company and all that stuff, there are obviously more tax tax adverse, maybe is a good term, maybe not. But there's places that are known that are better for that, and we've also seen in many instances too where a lot of people aren't even setting up their quote unquote address in the US. They're doing it in Dubai or other parts of the world that they're like, we're not charging you any taxes on what you make. That's yours. And we'll see long term if that sticks around, but it's going to be an interesting dynamic because I think as more and more people enter into running their own business and online world and all kinds of different things. You see it in on social media all the time. All of these online businesses that are popping up. You're like, okay, what are they doing to protect the fact that they can minimize tax? I'm not, and I want to make it clear, I'm not against paying taxes. That's how we have infrastructure. I'm not about that at all.
Mhm.
Okay, I want to make that clear to anybody that's watching or listening. but I don't want organizations to pay more than they're legally required to. And I think that's where, your services come in, where you can say, okay, let's navigate this a little bit. Let's see how we structure this way, where how we can do this to minimize the tax impact for an entrepreneur.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's why you see a lot of US businesses setting up in states like Delaware and Wyoming, who don't have the state tax to pay. They've got low fees of just business licensing or, very small fees to pay. Because actually, yeah, you can function out of a different state and do a lot of things around the US and avoid a big chunk of tax already just by where your company is set up or say your LLC is set up. So that's obviously the first port of call. But yeah, people can go one step further and they can try and move abroad and stuff. I mean, the danger of that is if you're going to be opening a company abroad, but still living in the US and running it from the US, the IRS are going to catch you basically all of the time. Because they'll just say, well, you're running the business from the US and you're a citizen here. So, um, people would have to give up their lives and actually move out to these places most of the time, which actually they are doing, and you're seeing that. And I guess the complexity is when you do that, say you move out to Dubai or you move out to the British Virgin Islands. I know you guys are picturing a nice island somewhere with a cocktail in the hand and running your business. Issue is those countries don't have tax treaties with the US, so you can sell into the US, but you can very easily create what's called effectively connected income or permanent establishment in the US, where they can still tax you anyway. So. You've got to be very, very smart about it, and you've got to sacrifice quite a lot to avoid paying tax if you're an actual US citizen and you love the States. And it's the conclusion I've drawn, as my company's got bigger, you ask the same question, do I want to go elsewhere? But you have to kind of pack up your bags and move your whole family over across the world just to avoid tax. And you think, well, what am I sacrificing just for a bit more money? And it's why people end up just paying tax most of the time. But the taxes that you can win, make quick wins on, as we've said, is more your kind of state taxes, sometimes your corporation taxes of how you structure your company, and that's quite important to know as well.
Yeah, there's many ways, and working with financial advisors and organizations like yours can help make the best decision for you, because yeah, uprooting and moving across the planet may not be the best thing for you. There might be some opportunities though where you think, what, that's actually a place that I would like to go. And everybody's different, yeah, but ideally, it's whenever you're setting up a business, better to do it sooner than later. Get those
Mm,
things kind of mapped out and say, okay, what happens if I hit this plateau, or excuse me, or this level when it comes to revenue, or
mhm.
these types of costs, and what are my options here? And again, not to be tax adverse, but just to say, okay, how can I structure this legally where I can minimize the impact on it and still get a return? And there's all kinds of different ways to do it, especially when it comes to compensating yourself,
Yeah,
from
yeah,
a revenue standpoint. It's
exactly.
get
Yeah,
get that structured right, and based on what you're looking for, and
yeah,
everybody's different. And I'm sure you get people coming to you all the time with all kinds of different things where they say, well, I want to get this out of the business, or how do I structure it this way, where should I do all of this?
yeah,
So
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. I think there's a couple of important things as well people need to remember. I think firstly, if they're building a business and they want a successful exit as well, they've got to really consider, um, well, have I done the right thing from day one, as you just said, Michael? Because if they haven't and they come to sell their business and they get audited, it's going to bite them in the backside. And I think that's really important to consider if you're wanting to scale as a business and do that. I think, can I just talk about sales tax for a second, Michael, about scaring all the audience away? Wonderful. I just want to bring it up because that is the single most complex tax that you wonderful people in the US have. Um, it still blows my mind how you managed to, in every different, you just said the United States, yeah, how ununited you are on the different rules of sales tax and the 10,000 plus different jurisdictions and, rules and laws. I want to say it doesn't have to be that complicated. I don't want it to scare people off starting to sell because, firstly, if you sell on marketplace facilitators like Amazon, even TikTok Shop now, which is trending a lot, eBay, Etsy, they collect and remit the sales tax for you. So straight away, your sales tax headache isn't there, if you're wanting to start off from that place. And then even beyond that part, like if you're then wanting to sell on your own website and you're more exposed or anything, the thresholds are very forgiving in these states of when you need to register. And obviously you can hit thresholds for other reasons like storing products. But I would say don't get put off because I'm sure there's some people listening here thinking, well, I was going to sell these t-shirts, I was going to do this thing, and I just thought, flipping heck, like selling across all of these states. I don't want it to seem as scary as it is because it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, we don't want to scare people from not launching their business. I'm always one. It's like it's better to launch a business and not have it reach the goals that you want than to never do it and wonder if you could have. It's like life's too short. Go for it. Whatever it
That's
is. I
it.
mean, be smart about it. Don't, risk your entire livelihood over something,
Hmm.
but, you know, test it out, check it out, see, talk with, mentors and I say friends, but if you have good supportive friends, they'll say, yeah, that's the best thing ever, even though it may not be because they don't want to hurt your feelings. But get mentors in your life and talk with advisors and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Like even in the work that you're doing, you're focused on the tax side of things, but because of your client base, you know it's working well and what's been successful and what's not necessarily going well right now based on everything that's going on in the world where someone says, yeah, I'm thinking about launching this business. You're going to say, you know, I've seen some organizations struggle. Not saying you would, but we're seeing some challenges here. And I just want to give you that heads up in case, there's something that, you want to help people avoid falling on their face if you can.
Yeah, yeah, completely. And I'd say as well, if anyone's listening today and they're not based in the US, Um, it's an even scarier thought to think I'm going to expand into the US to sell. Maybe you've already got a brand or you're already selling something, you're doing pretty well, and you see this great opportunity in the US, like I did 7 years ago. I'd say as well, it doesn't have to be that scary, and you have tax treaties with so many countries in the US that protect you in many scenarios from paying US income tax. Again, the way you set up, you don't have to be smacked by all of these crazy sales tax issues and everything. I would say again, start to do a bit of research on it and put the feelers out because you might be surprised at that kind of success you could have at expanding into the good old United States. It's called the land of opportunity for a reason.
Yeah, it's got a huge population that is big on consumerism. They like to consume. They like to buy things. It's been that
You
way
guys
for
love it.
very
You love it.
yeah. That's our pastime
Yeah,
is,
that's
is
it.
buying,
Yeah,
which is great because
yeah,
it benefits the world. And as we get to be more of a global economy, excluding tariffs, again, I stay far away from politics on this show.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's something to factor in too. Is that's something that is volatile and new,
Hmm.
and something could pop up tomorrow on
Yeah.
things where you're like, oh, wait a minute, I was selling this product from wherever that you made Etsy or whatever, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait a minute, now I got to deal with tariff fees. Now, again, if you're working in a platform like Etsy or eBay or um, there's other, I'm slipping my mind. There's some other places out there as well. They're usually pretty good in keeping on top of that. They're going to warn you saying, oh, by the way, the handcrafted soap that you're selling, that is under the tariff restrictions. So there's going to be an additional whatever fee
Hmm.
on top of that to let you know as the seller. And of course, as the buyer, you're going to recognize that as well, going, oh, yeah, I got to pay extra for this because there's currently, an additional tariff for tax. They're basically the same thing. And
Yeah.
you have to factor that in as a business because you're like, oh, wait a minute, if all my products are falling under that, okay, what do I do on that? Most organizations are just going to direct pass those tariffs straight onto the consumer. Larger companies, not many, but there are a few sometimes that will say, you know what, I've got enough margin here. I can eat some of that to continue to get the sales. Not good long term. I wouldn't recommend that just from my own personal opinion on that. You don't want to, you definitely don't, never want to lose money on a deal ever. You start, it's great. You want to be nice and helpful, but if you're losing money on the deal, that's not good for your business. That's not good for
Yeah.
longevity. You got to have surplus. The surplus helps you reinvest in the
Yeah.
business, also offset any ups and downs, which I wish it was a straight line as far as what revenue and expenses were every month. But guess what, kids? That's not how it works.
That would
Really
be
wish.
great.
Oh,
That
it'd
would
be
be
ideal.
ideal. Yeah.
Everybody would be in business then. We
I'm
wouldn't. There
in. I'm
wouldn't
back in. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I'm back. Yeah, it's all good. So
Yeah.
before, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking this whole tariff thing as well. It can't last forever. Like, there's got to be some give eventually, and it is a real shame because there's so many products that actually might not work well in another country, but will work well in the US. And again, like you say, because you guys, you're different. You think differently, and every country does. But I think there's a different kind of desire and mindset and psychology. So a product could do tenfold in the US what it would do in another country. And it's just a shame again that yeah, the entry point is really difficult at the moment because of tariffs and other stuff going on. But yeah, I'd keep an eye out on that. It's definitely worth keeping a finger on the pulse of it because there's got to be some wiggle room in the near future there.
Yeah, I anticipate that there will be some adjustments along the way, and from again, I avoid politics on this, but time of this recording, we're in February. There's midterm elections in November, which could sway things a bit. But
Hmm. Yeah,
I'm definitely not one to predict anything. You never know
yeah.
because 2 months from now could look completely different than it does now. This world has
Hmm.
been absolutely nonstop crazy since
Yeah,
2020. So there's no
yeah.
shortages of okay, what's going on in the world today?
Yeah.
It's a bit intense. So Ruben, I love this conversation. Where can people find out more about you and reach out to you with some help on all of this?
Yeah, so I would just give us a Google on RJM, Romeo Juliet Mike, tax exemption, which is our website as well, rjmtaxexemption.com. You can book a free consultation with us if you just want to chat things through, check out your kind of tax liability status selling into the US or whether you're planning on selling or already are. You can get a free kind of liability assessment just online as well by submitting your details. So yeah, check us out there. Check out our reviews as well. We're ranked number one on Trustpilot globally in quite a few areas in what we do. So we're fairly nice people. We're not going to bite you. We're not going to scare you off. We're not going to hard sell you anything. So yeah, please do come and have a chat with us. Even if you just get some value from our conversation, don't worry about it.
That's good. We'll definitely have that information in the show notes. So, Ruben, love the conversation. Thanks so much for making time today to be on the show.
Absolute pleasure.